Hello! We are back and talking about topic 2.3, the Indian Ocean system. So let's talk about this. The Indian Ocean system linked the lands bordering the Indian Ocean basin and the South China Sea. Trade took place in three distinct regions. The South China Sea, which was dominated by the Chinese and by Malays. The Southeast Asian, to the east coast of India, dominated by Malays and Indians, and then the west coast of India to the Persian Gulf and East Africa, dominated by Persians and Arabs. Trade in the Indian Ocean was made possible and followed the patterns of seasonal changes in the monsoon winds. Sailing technology unique to the Indian Ocean system included the lateen sail and a shipbuilding technique that involved piercing the planks, tying them together, and caulking them. Because the distances traveled were longer than the Mediterranean, traders in the Indian Ocean system seldom retained political ties to their homeland, but instead they formed socially distinctive communities throughout the region. But these socially distinctive communities were not necessarily politically independent. And that's a really important distinction to remember. Part of that is because with Indian Ocean trade and following those monsoon winds, merchants could be gone for months at a time, or years at a time, depending on what their routes were. There is evidence of early trade between ancient Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley, and this trade appears to have broken off because Mesopotamia turned more towards trade with East Africa. 2,000 years ago, Malay sailors from Southeast Asia migrated to the lands of Madagascar. These migrants, however, did not retain communications or trade with their homeland. And we'll talk about Madagascar later on, especially as we talk about the trade and then evolution of certain crops. So we'll be looking at sweet potatoes, we'll be looking at plantains, we'll also be looking at citrus fruits as well, and how these crops come from all over the world and became game changers for the populations they came to. The goods traded in the Indian Ocean system included a wide variety of spices, resins, pearls, Chinese pottery, and other luxury goods. The volume of trade was probably not as high as in the Mediterranean, but they did have more goods simply because the trading paths were even longer. The culture of the Indian Ocean ports was often isolated from that of their hinterlands. In the western part of the Indian Ocean, trading ports did not have access to large inland populations of potential consumers. Even in those eastern Indian and Malay Peninsula ports that did have access to large inland populations, these consumer civilizations did not become oriented towards the sea. Traders and sailors in the Indian Ocean system often married local women in the ports that they frequented, and these women became mediators between cultures, as did their children. Southeast Asia was connected by trade from at least the 1st century CE. Malay, Chinese, and Arab seafarers used the regular pattern of monsoon winds to establish trading routes in the Indian Ocean. And these flourished, especially when the rise of Islam created new markets and new networks of Muslim traders. The Chinese Ming Dynasty sponsored a series of voyages to the Indian Ocean between 1405 and 1433. Write that down. The Ming voyages were carried out on a grand scale. They involved fleets of over 60 large treasure ships and hundreds of smaller support vessels. And these voyages didn't really bring in a lot of money. It was more of a, let's go out and get tributes. Let's show the world what we can do. And they did, but it cost a lot of money. The treasure ships carried out trade in luxury goods such as silk and precious metals, and kind of stimulated diplomatic relationships with various African and Asian states. But again, though they stimulated some trade, they were very expensive, didn't do a whole lot, and then were actually, inspired some opposition, and eventually the empire would fall. But we'll talk about that later. Over a period of several thousand years, peoples originating from Asia crossed the water to settle the islands of the East Indies, New Guinea, the Melanesian, and Polynesian Islands. We'll look at New Zealand, as well as Australia, and other areas in the Pacific Ocean out to Hawaii. Polynesian use of the sweet potato, which was domesticated in South America, suggests that they may have reached the Americas at one point. Polynesian migration and the establishment of colonies was aided by the development of large double-hulled canoes that used both paddles and sails. Polynesian mariners navigated by the stars and by their observations of ocean currents and evidence of the land. So one thing that I find interesting that I do want to share with you is when we talk a little bit about the Polynesian voyages. And one of the things we're going to look at is Hawaii was actually, there's evidence of human life on Hawaii hundreds of years before there was evidence of human life on New Zealand. And what a lot of historians think is that through following the stars, waves, cloud formations, Polynesians knew about this region, but the people who ended up here somehow got blown off course. But I just find it very interesting. I want to share it with you guys that this region was populated before this region in relation to where they're coming from in Australia. So, the largest island continent. So technically it is not an island, it is a continent. All right, so in looking at Indian Ocean trade, again, take a look at these monsoon winds, guys. It is very important that sailors followed the winds, given how vast Indian Ocean trade was. The Indian Ocean trade increased between 1200 and 1500, and it was stimulated by the prosperity of Europe, Asia, and Africa, as well as Southeast Asian states. In the Red and Arabian Seas, trade was carried out on dhows, and from India to Southeast Asia, junks dominated the trading paths. Junks were technologically advanced vessels. They had watertight compartments and up to 12 sails, and they could carry up to 1,000 tons. They were developed in China, but during the 15th century, junks were also built in Bengal and Southeast Asia and sailed with crews from those places. Indian Ocean trade was decentralized and cooperative, so it's really the merchants who are running it. And various regions supplied particular goods. In each region, a certain port functioned as the major emporium for trade, in which goods from smaller ports were consolidated and shipped onward. So taking a look at Africa, the Swahili coast, and Zimbabwe, as well as Aden. By 1500, there were 30 or 40 separate city-states along the East African coast that were participating in Indian Ocean trade. The people of these coastal cities were the Swahili people, all spoke an African language enriched with Arabic and Persian vocabulary. Swahili cities, including Kilwa, were famous as exporters of gold that was mined in or around the island kingdom, whose capital city was Great Zimbabwe. So that would be the inland kingdom of this region. Great Zimbabwe's economy rested on agriculture, cattle herding, and grazing. Pardon me. The city declined due to an ecological crisis that was brought on by deforestation and grazing. So we have our Swahili city-states, guys, and then we have Great Zimbabwe. Aden had enough rainfall to produce wheat for export and a location that made it a central transit point for trade from the Persian Gulf Coast, East Africa, and Egypt. The merchants prospered on this trade and built what appeared to be travelers to a wealthy and impressive city. In general, a common interest in trade allowed the various peoples and religions of the Indian Ocean basin to live in peace. Violence did sometimes break out, such as when Christian Ethiopia fought with the Muslims of the Red Sea coast over control of trade. But typically, it was far and few between. The state of Gujarat prospered from Indian Ocean trade, exporting cotton textiles and indigo in return for gold and silver. Gujarat was not simply a commercial center, it was a manufacturing center. Write that down, manufacturing center that produced textiles such as leather goods. Carpets was a big one, guys. Silk and other commodities. The overseas trade was dominated by Muslims, but Hindus could also benefit. Calicut and other cities, the Malabar coast, exported cotton textiles and spices and also served as clearinghouses for long-distance trade. The cities of the Malabar coast were unified in a loose confederation whose rulers were tolerant of other religions and ethnic groups. The Strait of Malacca was the principal passage from the Indian Ocean to the South China Sea. In the 14th century, a gang of Chinese pirates would actually prey upon the strait, not only under the control of the Java-based kingdom of Majapahit. In 1407, the forces of the Ming dynasty crushed these pirates. The Muslim ruler of Malacca took advantage of this to exert his domination over the strait and to make Malacca into a major port and a center for trade. It would also become one of the leading cities of Islamic learning. In the fields of education, guys, commercial contacts and the spread of Islam led to a variety of social and cultural changes in which local cultures incorporated and changed ideas, customs, and architectural styles from the civilizations they encountered. Africa and Indian mosques are great examples of the synthesis of Middle Eastern and local architecture styles. In the field of education, the spread of Islam brought literacy to African people who first learned Arabic and then used the Arabic script to write their own languages and to write their stories. In India, literacy was already established, but the spread of Islam brought the development of a new Persian-influenced language, Urdu, as well as paper-making technology. As it spread to Africa, India, and Southeast Asia, Islam also brought with it the study of Islamic law, administration, Greek science, mathematics, and medicine. Timbuktu, Delhi, and Malacca were three of the new centers of Islamic learning. Islam spread peacefully. Forced conversions were rare, and Muslim domination of trade contributed to the spread of Islam as merchants attracted by the common moral codes and laws of Islam converted. And as Muslim merchants in foreign lands established households and then converted their wives and local servants, Islam continued to spread. The Islamic destruction of the last center of Buddhism in India contributed to the spread of Islam in that country as well. Islam brought social and cultural changes to the communities that converted, but Islam itself could be changed, even if only temporarily, in Africa, India, Indonesian societies. And there's a great book I recommend. It's The Bad Tukis Librarians of Timbuktu. That's not quite what it's called, but you can just Google it. And it's this amazing book about how these librarians saved these ancient and classical texts in Timbuktu and how they got them out of there. I won't spoil it for you, but it's amazing, and you should all read it. It's fantastic. So let me know if you have any questions, guys. Always here to help. Have a good one, y'all. Cheers.